One day when I still worked as a customs agent, I had to go to a shipping company to pick up a bill of lading, but while I was there the company's computer system was down. So while we waited, I got talking to the guy behind the counter and I began to share Jesus with him. And just as we got started talking about Jesus, the computer system came up again, so he gave me my documents and I had to get going. But before I left, I gave him a gospel tract, a gospel pamphlet, which a friend of mine had made. I just left it with him. Well, probably about a year or two later, I was in a Christian bookstore. Late at night, the bookstore decided to open until after midnight. So it was after midnight when I was there, and I had a strong feeling in my spirit that I should walk around to the other aisle. So I went behind the book stand to the other aisle, and I saw a young man there, and I noticed the title of the book he was reading. It was called The Aldersgate Experience of John Wesley. To look at, he was a fairly rough looking sort of a guy, so I was a bit amused that a guy who looked like that would be so attracted to such a theological title. And I went and said hello to him, and he looked at me, and straight away he recognized me. But at the time I didn't recognize him, and he said, "Oh, don't you remember about a year ago you came to Union Bulk Ships and you handed me a gospel pamphlet?" And then I remembered. He said, "Well, when you gave me that gospel pamphlet, when I got home I read it, and I thought to myself, this is what I've been looking for." And he said, I got on the phone and I rang up my friends who we used to do drugs with, and I said, "Hey, come over here, read this pamphlet. I think I've found what we've been looking for." So he told me that his friends came straight over and each of them read the pamphlet, and they all agreed, yep, this is what we've been looking for. So they decided we need to go to church. So they got the Courier Mail, the Brisbane newspaper, and they looked up the advertisements for a church, and they found a church called Christian Outreach Centre, and they all decided to go there. Well, that particular night when they went to Christian Outreach Centre, there was a guest speaker named Helen Ividovich, and it was a perfect night for these young guys. That night she was dressed up in full leathers, and she rode a Harley down the aisle of the church, so they related perfectly to it, and the whole lot of them got saved. And that night in the bookstore, this young man told me that he began a home group meeting, and so many of his unsaved friends came and started to get saved that the church called it the non-Christians home meeting. And he told me that something like about 30 people had been saved and had been added to the church in that period of time. So it made me realize what a difference just giving one gospel tract can make. I never saw the guy again after that until the day I saw him in the bookstore, and he told me about everything that God had done in the interim. And I would never have learnt the rest of the story if I hadn't followed that inner witness of the Spirit to go to the next aisle in the bookstore. Until the day I saw him in the bookstore, and he told me about everything that God had done in the interim. And I would never have learnt the rest of the story if I hadn't followed that inner witness of the Spirit to go to the next aisle in the bookstore.